Hey, Bobby Manning here. Welcome to a Tuesday edition of the Garden Report before the final game, before the Celtics trade deadline or NBA trade deadline on Thursday. And Noah Dalzell is here from Celtics blog. He's made a couple appearances on the Garden Report down at the Garden as well. And Noah, we're kicking around a lot of names here. I know good friend of the show and the network, B-Rob, posted a million names that the Celtics could go after here. I have a more narrow list of guys that I'm interested in. And frankly, no, I'm always the guy who says go for it, go get a guy, trade the picks, go all in. And I actually don't feel that way this year. I think they have enough. I don't think anyone who joins this roster is going to play a big enough role where it's going to move a needle. And frankly, despite many concerns about the bench coming into this year, which is what we're talking about here when it comes to many of these moves, the bench has been really good this year. Pritchard, Hauser, Cornette, even Keita has shown to be a good depth big, and O'Shea Brissett has earned some trust in that forward role. So I think the easiest answer heading into Thursday is that we're not going to see anything, or we're going to see something pretty minor. But Celtics are always prone to surprises here, and all the reporting is that they're looking to upgrade here. So where's your mind at? What do you want to see from them? What are you expecting from them?
Yeah. I'm the opposite of you. I never want the team to make a move if things are looking good, just because I feel like even just today at practice, Joe Mazzulla talked about how they have this good chemistry and there's the buy-in between the role players and the starters and there's the familiarity with the system. So to me, it's like you're the best record in the league by quite a bit. And so if you can hold on to the chemistry and the camaraderie and not bring someone in that might disrupt that in any sense, you're probably better off. My only thing right now is just the trust in the health of the front court. That's the only, question mark I have. I know Brad has talked about, a big wing. I feel like with O'Shea Brissett, they found that. If not him, I think there's other potential candidates. But when you're talking about Porzingis, like if he's missed so many games this year, and it's kind of hard to gauge how many of them he actually missed and he needed to miss, and how many of them were kind of maybe resting a little bit, or he could have played through if it was the playoffs. That's my biggest reservation, though, is like if the whole title run comes down to his health, do you have enough outside of him that you trust in the playoffs? And I don't know if between Luke Cornett, who's awesome as a regular season player, but we haven't seen him in a postseason run, and Keita, who's been great, but also has looked a little bit lost at times defensively. And I don't know if you have, at this point in his career, he's a guy that's going to get playoff minutes. So that's the only thing I could see is like maybe as they're mulling it over and they're kind of already looking at all the lingering things that Porzingis has dealt with this year, like are you able to count on a full postseason run?
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the regret if you do nothing, is if a guy
Right.
misses a
Right.
game or two and you need some supplemental depth, complementary guys, someone who can step in and fill in a bigger role in a playoff setting, as you said, not just a regular season one where you can come in and play a decent game and probably get by, especially against a low level opponent. You're going to end up regretting doing nothing, I think, if you get to the postseason. And as you said, Porzingis missed a game or two. If he goes down for a long stretch, I don't think there's much you can do there in terms of filling in his impact on the team and what he's brought this year. You just don't have the assets to bring in that kind of guy. If they could bring in a big who could potentially start for you in those circumstances, I think you do it. And that's why people keep pointing toward Kelly Olynyk, I think, who's probably the first name we'll bring up here. And probably the least likely to me because of the money. It's $12 million. You have to sign him after this year if you do go and acquire him. And I can't find a path to doing that with how many contracts you'd have to send out. The Jazz, I don't even think can bring in that many guys, as we've talked about. And there was maybe some hope early in the year of a buyout. I know when he came down here at shoot around with the Jazz, he talked about being open to joining the Celtics
Yeah.
if the opportunity presented itself. But the Jazz have played well. They're hovering around 500. They're in playoff positioning out west. Will Hardy said a million times that he doesn't want this to be a long rebuild. And I'm sure they'd be open to keeping him around after this year if he wants to stay. So that to me would be a dream. Like Porzingis goes down for a couple games. Kelly Olynyk and Al Horford fill the front court. Kelly does a lot of the things that this team likes between his shooting and passing, dribble handoff game. And always was a bit of an underrated defender, even though I wouldn't call him great. So if he got bought out this week and he wants to come here, I think that's the dream scenario in terms of the way he'd supplement the front court. But you have Horford, you have Porzingis. That's been a dynamic that I think has worked in terms of each player filling in for one another on the front and second half of these back-to-backs here. So there's some reporting today that they're interested in another big to add to this mix here. Drummond's a name, that's available and seems feasible in terms of his cost and, what you'd have to give up to get him here. But it brings me back, Noah, to something Brad Stevens talked about in the fact that you kind of need a guy who's going to come in and not expect to play because there's just, for
Exactly.
whoever comes in, so much in front of them.
And that's what I keep coming back to because I do think Drummond is a good fit. Like, obviously, we all know he's a prolific rebounder. It hasn't been a strength of this team. I think just the fact that he's a veteran player, like they kind of have a young bench for a team that's contending. Like they could have spent the offseason trying to pick up a couple of older guys that are more proven, and that's not really the approach that they took. So I like the idea of Drummond, but not if he's looking at this as a downgrade. I mean, he's been a starter on the Bulls, right? And so if he's looking at this as an opportunity to win a championship and be a locker room guy and kind of fill in when needed, then cool. But I think you'd want that buy-in from him like before making that type of trade because you don't want to bring in a guy that is kind of pissed off that he lost a lot of the kind of role and opportunity that he had, even if it wasn't for a great team. And I know Olynyk, like I think he would be more open to that, but even so, like he's not going to have the same opportunities that he's having in Utah right now. So I think like that's first and foremost is like the person you're going to bring in is not going to disrupt this flow that's been built between this team. And I think this team is uniquely unselfish. We're kind of spoiled with competitive teams here in Boston, but I think this group's really worked. So I think that's the first priority is anything you're doing this in the next couple of days here, you're not going to disrupt that. And then secondarily, I think if you can get a proven big that you can trust in case Porzingis goes down, that would be ideal. But I wouldn't be shocked if nothing happened personally, but I don't have a great temperature on these things.
Yeah. And this Drummond's game is never one I've loved. A great rebounder, physical presence in there, a veteran with experience. But you look at the downsides in terms of mobility and defense for him in many aspects, and the free throw shooting is a massive one. And I think that's been, you talk about luxuries now, this team has shot free throws well across the board. And, maybe some spot moments they've slipped up, but over the years, especially at that big position, they've had some really good free throw shooters and do again between Porzingis, Horford, and Cornette's actually been really good at that this year too. And I believe in Cornette. I really do, just in terms of filling out that small depth role if you need it in the playoffs. And as I said, if Porzingis went down for a game or two, depending on the matchup, there's certain teams that Cornette can't play against just because he's spread so far out and you don't love him on the perimeter at all defensively, out switching and, wherever teams would put him in. He could fill some small minutes out there. The worry would just be you have to play so much Horford in those circumstances that, as you saw last year, he could be prone to burning out, especially another year older and with more responsibility on his plate in those circumstances. So I get the desire to add a depth big, but one thing I know is that there was a little regret last year going on and getting a Mike Muscala, paying 2 second-round picks, him being that Rob insurance, Rob never going down until like late in the playoffs, and Muscala pretty much sitting on the bench the whole way and then going out in a trade. So I think that's what you worry about. If you go and get Drummond, that's probably not going to happen with him because he's just a better player than Muscala was. But if he just comes in and you don't need him.
Yeah. But Drummond's been playing really well. I think like that's why I feel like maybe a few months ago I wouldn't have been as high on him, but he has been really excelling in the last few months, kind of across the board, all things considered. But I agree with you. I mean, you don't want to the Muscala trade, like that's not it's one of the ones that like aged. I mean, it wasn't like disastrous, but yeah, it didn't age particularly well.
No, it ended well because you move him for Porzingis with the money there, but in terms of what he actually brought on the court, it wasn't a ton. And, you still look at Drummond, as you said, there's some eye-popping numbers. He's 10-10 over his last 19. Not a great finisher at 59% inside, but some massive games, especially over that stretch from right after Christmas until January 8th. He averaged 14 and 17, playing 27 minutes a game there. So he can rack it up. I don't think rebounding's a huge need on this team. I know they've slipped up a couple
Yeah.
situations lately there, but overall they're a pretty good gang rebounding team for a smaller lineup, and they have some great offensive rebounders off that bench. So I don't know, it's just not a move I'd make. If it costs nothing and he wants to come and sacrifice and just be a guy on the team, I don't have a problem with that, because I had some skepticism about the Blake Griffin edition last year, and I thought he filled a tremendous role on the team and adjusted, and was a good guy in the locker room and all of that. So if there's something they see there that I don't, and there's some, conversation about a role he would fill here that we don't know about, I'm willing to see it through. But I just don't feel like big man is the biggest need on this team. It's that 4 spot, and they haven't missed Grant Williams a ton this year, but it's a piece that helped them last postseason at spots, and certainly 2 postseasons ago when they made the finals, having that versatile forward who can shoot, who can guard multiple positions. And there's some confidence in Brissett right now being able to do that, obviously at a lower level and a more narrow focus at that 4 position. But the shooting's been rough, 23% recently on his last 21 threes. He's not Grant there. And,
Yeah.
you're not going to replace Grant because Grant costs $10 million a year plus for what he brings. And you're not going to be able to acquire that either. But, you're looking at some of the names that popped up today. Otto Porter's an interesting one to me. Can he get to that price? Probably
Did you?
not.
Yeah. I mean, I looked at the game played log, and he's just never had a healthy season. And so if you're
Yeah.
looking like an insurance guy, I feel bad saying it because I feel bad for anybody that's so injury prone, and he had that 1 year with the Warriors, but that's just not a move you can count on in any sense, just based on. And I think he's dealing with some foot thing, or he was recently.
And he makes a little more than that TP too.
Yeah.
I think it's 6'2" on the TP, and he's at 6'3". So his
Mm.
name got tossed out there today, I think by Fisher. Doesn't make a ton of sense in that sense unless you're just stacking up minimum salaries at the end of the roster to go and get him. But you think of what Stevens and Svi have brought at different points. Probably comparable to what you'd be getting out of Porter, as you mentioned there, especially considering some of the injuries and diminished play from him. Although he's a veteran who's won a championship and played some big roles in the past, so that might be what you're looking for there. The big one of the day, though, isn't at that 4 spot. It's in that backcourt spot where maybe this is where the Celtics end up surprising us, because you look at what Drew and Derrick have brought this year. They've been able to fill the brunt of the production at that spot. Pritchard's been good, I feel like, and especially the games where his offense isn't rolling, he's been able to offensive rebound, and I think his defensive numbers are better than people would expect this year. So he's been able to do something each night to contribute positively to winning. But the question people have, especially based on past postseason performance with him, is can he survive when teams are hunting him, when they're trying to get him off the floor, uh, when the shot's not falling in those circumstances? Do you have a guy that can contribute in those spots? Can he be a guy who has those big bursts of scoring off the bench nights? And he hasn't had a lot of those this year. So Lonnie Walker and the Nets in general to me are an interesting trade partner. He's hurt right now, hamstring. That's something that could linger. Certainly, I think if you trade for him Thursday, I don't think he's in the lineup Friday. So he's going to miss a little bit of time here, I'd imagine, with that. But get him down the line, a guy who's scoring 12 points a game this year, who's shooting 48 from the field, which is a really good number for 9 shots, and 44 from 3, which probably isn't reality for him, 36 career shooter, but he can knock it down, at least at a higher rate than Brissett is right now. But he's not at that 4 position. He's a 6'4" guard who, when he plays, we've seen him against the Celtics a couple times this year. Now, he has the ball in his hands a lot in that second unit, and he's usually looking to score. I think, what's the average for assists? 1.6,
Yeah.
1.1 turnovers. So not really an impact passer. But if you feel that's something you need off your bench in a playoff situation, and it's certainly something that helped the Celtics last year with Malcolm Brogdon, he's not a super expensive player. I think he comes in at, let's see what his salary is here, 2.3. and he expires after this year. He's
That's
25 years
cool,
old. I see why people are excited about that, especially if it doesn't cost you a ton here, and it can go right into the TPE, so you really don't have to even give up anything for that. But is there a role? Are there enough shots for him? Does he kind of mess with what the bench is doing here, just in terms of his style? I know that's obviously what they have the most concern about when it comes to bringing someone in right now.
Yeah, I love Lonnie Walker. I think he's a great player, and I think he's going to be someone that emerges over the next few years, just knowing how, what a kind of 3-level scorer he can be. I don't think this is a great fit for him. Like, I think he needs to go somewhere where he has the opportunity to have the ball in his hands more rather than less. Like, he's a guy that can come off the bench and score, and I don't see him prioritizing winning a championship at this point in his career. Like, he's talked extensively about wanting to find like a long-term home and, make a name for himself and all of that. That being said, if he was bought in, like, to have a guy that can create his own shot like that, not that Pritchard can't and not that Hauser can't, because I think they've both been more reliable than previous years, but he brings a different level of offensive versatility, and so I think that would be a big add. But I would be surprised if the Celtics landed him. I think that he's going to be a pretty coveted guy, and I'd imagine the pick upside for the Nets is going to be pretty good. But I would be surprised if they of all the potential candidates that might want him, if the Celtics pulled it off. But he's really appealing. I mean, that's a steal of a contract for what the upside is of him as a player. I was sure after last year's playoff run he was going to sign a nice little deal, but maybe the sample size was a little too small for that.
Yeah, and again, the shooting historically hasn't been strong from him. He's more of an in-between guy to me than a three-point shooter, especially a catch-and-shoot guy, which is, what the Celtics going to be looking for alongside some of their more ball-dominant players into second units. Because, again, they're not going to be putting out 5 bench guys in the playoffs. They're going to be playing Tatum and Brown 40 minutes, and bench guys are going to kind of shuffle in alongside them. So, if Brown's out there with him, the ball's going to be in Brown's hands a lot more often than it is Walker's, and that's why Pritchard works, because he's able to kind of spread the floor and get out to the side and catch and shoot. And I get the fascination in upgrading over him, but I think if you really want to do that, and obviously they just extended Pritchard, you're probably utilizing Pritchard's contract to do that and actually sending him out and bringing in a guy who is here for the long haul. And you make a great point there, knowing that his contract's expiring. He's looking for a long-term home and certainly looking to get paid too,
Yeah.
which I think is the difficult part for bringing in some of the more popular names like Walker. I know Sadiq Bey has been mentioned a ton in our chat. I wouldn't mind it, but he's going into restricted free agency this summer. And when you have to pay Drew Holiday this summer, which is already going to be difficult in its own right, haggling with some of these bench guys who haven't been paid yet in their careers and who can reasonably ask for at least $10 million, given where the cap's going, I just don't think it's going to work for this team. I think you need more of a cost control guy, or you're looking at a rental in one of these guys who's probably going to take off over the summer. And as we mentioned, you just did that with Muscala, lost a couple second round picks doing it. I think they have 8 now to toss around. And certainly you're in win now mode. You're not thinking too much about the future if you're the Celtics. But at the same time, you had to move back a bunch in that last draft to kind of recoup all those second rounders that you lost over the years with like the Evan Fournier trade and, some stuff like that they've done here. So I don't think you're just tossing around second round picks for a guy who's going to be here, maybe doesn't play a ton, and then is gone after the year. Like, I think you have to look a little bit more long-term with what you're doing here.
Sorry, I'm laughing at the Luke Cornett "don't trade me." I was gonna try to keep a straight face, but I couldn't.
We're not gonna. At least us. I don't know about the
No,
Celtics.
I think, like, I know this is not like the best basketball analysis, but like, how can you trade someone like Luke Cornett midseason that's so obviously like so critical to this team? Like, that type of person, like, that's what makes me nervous about the trade deadline, is that right now, like, you have a good thing going. And like, I know I've said that before, but like, you lose a guy, even like a guy like Pritchard or a guy like Hauser that's just been so integral to this team. And like, next thing you know, they go on a little bit of a stretch, and we're on a little bit of a slide here, and we're all talking about, oh God, did they ruin the team chemistry and locker room? Like, I just think you have a lot more to lose than to gain right now.
And those guys haven't been a problem.
Right.
You look at them on the whole in terms of what you're
Not at
expecting
all.
out of them. They've all filled their roles this year. And I think that's a big reason. Brad talked about that a little bit too, that they've succeeded this year. Because you look at the bench, it's not an extraordinarily
Yeah.
talented group, but their roles are so simple and defined in terms of how they play alongside the talented players on this roster. And you have 6 big time talented players here that all you have to do if you're O'Shea is go out there and crash in the corner. And he's done a great job with that. You know, could maybe stand to knock down an extra shot or two here or there, but he's starting to pass better out of some of those shots too, which I think is a huge step for him in terms of trusting and setting up some guys around him, even if he can't finish in those spots. So I think that's going to continue to help him. Horford's your backup big effectively, which is about as good as you can do there. And that allows Kornet to be that depth guy. And I don't think there's many teams with better depth bigs than Kornet. Pritchard and Hauser, the ones you're looking at because they don't have a ton of playoff experience. And they're the ones who are actually probably going to have to go out and play 10, 15 minutes in a playoff game as the backups there and step into bigger roles if someone goes down for a game or two, as we talked about at the beginning of the show. So these aren't the things that are going to swing their championship aspirations one way or another. And whether they make a move or not isn't either. It's going to come down to the top end guys on the roster, namely Brown and Tatum, and how they come through here. And you can try to support them as much as you can with an extra move or two here or there. But the work was done over the summer, and they have a pretty good bench here, I think, overall. Like, it's going to be hard to upgrade over what they have right now.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it. Like, it's going to come down to, like, can Porzingis stay healthy? Can Tatum play like an MVP caliber player in the playoffs? Like, those are the things that it's going to come down to, and these marginal pieces are probably not going to make much of an impact. So, yeah, I find another thing that's funny is, like, we're writing all these articles and we're speculating, and then whatever happens Thursday is going to come out of left field probably, and it'll be a name that
That's what's killing me right now. No, I can't find the name. I know they're going to do something because there's a lot of reasons to do something right now.
Yeah.
Like, you look at the team,
Yeah.
you have a TPE, which you won't, again, going forward effectively in this era because of the new rules coming through. You can't combine salaries in the future. So if you want to do like a Shvee, Lamar, that kind of thing at the bottom of the roster, Banton, and like trade $6 million for $6 million, you can't do that going forward. So now, if you really want to combine those guys into one small to medium sized contract into the future, now's the time to do it.
Yeah.
You have some picks, like your pick this year. Do you want to use that? Do you want to actually draft a guy in that first round? That's a decision you can make right now. And then, of course, you're going to see all kinds of restrictions put up on what you can do going forward in the future in terms of trade money and all that kind of stuff. So this might be your last chance to add a rotation guy or at least a back end of the rotation guy to the mix you already have here going forward. And, there's some more down the line stuff that they're going to have to figure out with the guards in the backcourt and maybe position themselves to sign both of those guys. And, there's a lot of different considerations here. But to me, I just think when you take everything into account and all the reporting and their activity here, I think something's going to happen. Now, just like with Muscala last year, I think we're going to have a hard time anticipating what it is. I think a lot of the names being thrown around aren't going to be the ones that they end up with here. So, how do you find it? I think you're looking at guys who make less than $6 million. I think you're looking at guys who don't need to play necessarily. And that's why I still think John Conchar is probably my favorite name on a Grizzlies team that isn't going anywhere. Not a hugely impactful player, but a guy who can play a couple different positions, can shoot a little bit in different spots in his career. He's shown to be able to knock down a shot, and is a solid rebounder. And I think last year had some pretty good defensive metrics and can guard a couple different positions. And just to me, fits a bunch of different roles on a team. And I think the big thing more than anything, though, is if, let's say, like Horford had to miss a game or two in the playoffs, you feel decently about him sliding up into like a 4 spot next to Porzingis in certain lineups and playing a little bit more. And if you're fully healthy, he's a guy who in Memphis who has sat and not played for long stretches. So I don't think there's any problem for him doing that on a winning team. So that would be my choice. And again, only makes $6 million over the next couple years here. So you could flip them down the line again, keep them around on a relatively cheap deal. And if it doesn't work out, doesn't really kill you from a money perspective. He's $6 million next year, 6 in 26, 6 in 2027, and he's only 27 this year. So it's a popular name. It's a name that's been tossed around a ton. I don't know how much it costs. I know. I think Bobby Marks wrote that it might cost the first, but to me, it's something that makes sense, especially if you're packaging up a couple guys at the back end of the roster into one guy.
Yeah, I just don't like the idea of packaging up like 4 people that have been integral to this team and integral to the locker room and individual relationships for someone that's like a marginal thing and losing a pick over it. Like you have to really believe that this is going to be a substantial upgrade, and that's where I'd probably be a terrible GM because I'd be like I don't lives in this practice facility, but that's like at least how I view it. In a first round pick, ultimately, like they don't have that many of those. You know, I would want to make sure that like that's being used as like the best possible value return. And so I don't know. I look forward to the whole thing being over, honestly, because I feel like it's been so much guessing and so much just you have to like everybody just wants
Get
to get
ready, Noah. This is the most important time of the year.
Right. And like I was looking at like Brian Robb's article on Mass Live, and I'm like, the name has to be on here, right? Like he has 25 names.
He found every name.
Right.
So let me just run through these real quick. And again, shout out to Brian Robb, who hosts a podcast with Jay and Sam here on CLNS Media sometimes. Jalen Smith, probably cross it off. Pacers are winning. Nick Richards, I like the name. Signed 3 years, similar to Conchar, can be a depth guy who's used to not playing a ton, but can play when needed. I wouldn't rule that one out, especially on the Hornets, but to me, doesn't fill a huge need. Plumlee, probably not happening. Clippers. Dwight Powell, similar. I know he's not playing a ton in Dallas, as far as I know, but funny enough, Dwight Powell was the first guy I interviewed, Noah, like 4 years ago when I was at the Garden. I wanted to ask him about his time with the Celtics, and he was like, "What about it?"
Not good experience.
Yeah, I was like, "Oh, all right."
My first
Drummond.
He was very nice.
Drummond, we hit on. Wouldn't that be funny if it's Muscala?
At least you don't have to worry that he knows like the terminology, he knows the system somewhat, you know.
And no one's talking about him again. It's like, whoa, it's Muscala
again. Yeah, for 2 more second-round draft picks.
I can't rule it out. Not for that much, but maybe he's a guy they buy out or something like that. Day'Ron Sharpe, he's a guy I hit on today. Rookie scale deal, needs a new contract. Again, that's tricky, but it'll be a restricted free agent, so maybe it doesn't cost a ton to keep him. I've really liked him in Brooklyn, rolling off of Harden, especially when Harden was there. Doesn't play a ton, but physical, rebounding, rolling big, who's young and has a lot of room for development. You obviously have to think long-term about Horford's future now, too, with Grant gone, who's going to eventually be that next big up in the rotation when Horford's career comes to a close here. So that to me is a little bit more of a forward-thinking role, that if you really have an emergency this year and you need a physical big man, I think that makes a ton of sense. And obviously the Nets need draft picks. Nets are really starting to fall out of things here, and they have Nick Claxton at that position, who they're probably more invested in there. So that to me, if I'm going to pick a guy that I think could come out of nowhere, surprise some people, and make sense here, that's the one to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't be stunned, honestly. I mean, I actually don't think they're going to do anything. That's my intuition about it. But I think, yeah, someone who's familiar and kind of used to being okay with being out of the rotation to me would be like a critical piece here. That's like one of the top priorities, I would say.
Yeah, and they've obviously forecasted that a little bit. Some other ones, Jalen McDaniels, maybe. I think they've had some interest in him in the past. He signed 2 years to that wing position. Fontecchio is a name that's been tossed around with them. I think that's a little redundant with Hauser. Craig, probably too far down the rotation. I know our guy Adam Taylor loves Chris Dunn. I don't think they're going to give him up there in Utah, but we'll see. Najee Marshall's a name I like too, but again, rotation guy with the Pelicans who are winning, so I don't know why they give him up. So you might be right, Noah. Might be nothing here. I wouldn't be devastated. Again, I usually am in favor of them really going for it and going all in. I just don't think there's enough out there this year, but there's probably some posturing going on too with some of this reporting that it's not going to be a busy deadline, not much is going to happen, and then all of a sudden at
Right.
2 o'clock on Thursday, things are going to start going crazy.
What was your prediction last year?
My prediction?
Yeah, what was your prediction last year? Like, what did you think
Ah,
was going to happen?
Good question. I'm having trouble remembering last month. I think I remember them wanting some Rob insurance, but I don't think Muscala got me that excited.
Mhm.
Good question. I'll circle back on that for after the pod here,
Find
but
views.
I gotta see who I was interested in. I know before last year, Bruce Brown was the big one for me, and it did kill me watching him go off in Denver for the mid-level exception while the Celtics signed Gallinari, who obviously went down with the ACL tear there.
Yeah.
Gallinari's another interesting one too. If he would come back and play at the end of the roster there on a buyout, and obviously the Celtics are pretty limited in their buyout guys that they can get, but Gallinari would be on that list of possible buyout additions, and they have a roster spot right now too. Of course, they need to sign Kada as well. He's at 37 out of 50 days with the NBA team, the limit of 50. So that's going to happen sooner rather than later now if they're going to do it. So keep an eye on that as well with what the Celtics do here at the deadline. But I think we covered all the bases there, Noah. I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor here, FanDuel. And this is a big week at FanDuel. You can go over there right now and get up to $200 in bonus bets for the big game. Of course, I think Gronk's doing that kick and everything else. They got a lot going on over there. Great app. Get paid instantly and get $200 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com/Boston. Of course, you got to be 21 plus, present in Mass. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Bet $5, get $200 when you get started at FanDuel.com/Boston, the official sports wagering partner of CLNS Media and the Garden Report. Shout out to them. And let's kick around the All-Star game, though. Jaylen Brown's going to dunk.
I'm thrilled.
Which I'm thrilled about. Yeah, I don't know why anyone has pause about this. I get you're always worried that a guy's going to get hurt, but we haven't really seen that over the years. So, again, you're knocking on wood there, but I was hoping that the excitement of him doing this would get some other stars up. Maybe a friend like Donovan Mitchell who's done it before, or some of the other guys in the league that you want to see in this thing. But it's Brown and a cast similar to the one we've seen in recent years. It's Toppin, not Obi Toppin. It's Jacob Toppin.
And when
Mac McClung.
and he said no, and then the brother jumped in.
Maybe. I mean, when you're down this low, Jacob Toppin, I think a two-way guy in the Knicks, so mostly a G League player. Mac McClung, who dazzled last year by surprise, but mostly a G League guy. And who was the fourth one? I'm forgetting the name. Jaime Jaquez, who, maybe he'll be a surprise guy this year. Played really well for the Heat to start the year, one of the best rookies in this class. So that one's not bad. But a couple of G League guys again. And Jaylen, who, let's see what he's got here. Can he bring some creativity? Can he bring some flair? He's obviously one of the best in-game dunkers we've ever seen with the Celtics. And I've said that going back a while now. When you really put it into perspective, he's one of the best dunkers that the Celtics have ever had here. And probably the biggest star in this contest going back to like Dwight and Blake Griffin, who was young, when he did it there. So this is awesome. There's really no other way around it. It's just a little bit of a bummer that there's not a stronger field around him.
Yeah, I mean, I could see people thinking like it was going to lead to other people doing it. I'm not surprised it didn't, because I feel like this is such a lose-lose situation in some sense for these stars, especially guys like Jaylen Brown that are already
It's a big decision for him.
Right, like he has the reputation of being one of the best dunkers in the league right now. I feel like a lot of the players have said that too. That in game right now, like nobody really compares as far as like the regularity of it too. You can pretty much count on a big dunk like every game or two. So I think this is super cool. The fact that he's basically just doing this because he wants to and thinks that he can still show off something, even though we all know he's a great dunker. And there's actually like so much pressure on him, because if he's like the worst in the cast, like, it's like all these, I don't want to say the word scrubs, but like guys that are, kind of not known NBA players. And then you have an all-star that already gets clowned on way disproportionately from national media.
Oh, God, he's really putting himself out there.
Yeah, like, I think this is so cool. And also, like, we already know he's such a unique person. Like, there's so many things that he just does differently than other stars, and just his approach on, like, fashion and, like, covering the Nike swoosh. Like he's just a very interesting person. And so I think this just kind of fits his mold of like, he's going to be the first all-star to do the dunk contest. And maybe he'll flop and everybody will say that was kind of a waste. But even that, I think, is still just cool to try. Mazzulla had a good line in practice today. Like, he'll be good at anything he tries. So I'm sure he'll be good. I look forward to it.
It's a big platform for him too. Everyone's going to be watching it. It's the main event that Saturday. I think him being in as the lone star is going to attract some eyebrows, and whether it's to promote his brand or whatever else he's doing, I think it's going to be effective in that sense. But he does have to come through here, and it can be tough. A lot of dunks have been tried already. I know Forsberg threw out like a funny cookies and cream one with Porzingis, but Porzingis isn't going to be there, and we'll get to that in a minute. So I don't think that's going to happen. Could he do something with the left hand to kind of give an FU to everybody? I think that's fun too.
I think Luke might be involved.
I know Luke gonna go. I know Grant was there last year for some reason,
Luke
but
will come to this if he's a part of the dunk.
I think Derrick said that today, right? Go with a 7-footer.
Yeah.
Dunk over a 7-footer. But
he needs like somebody there at least for some of the dunks, just to get him in his groove.
Yeah, it's tough to come up with original stuff now, and that I do have confidence with him. Like, I don't think he's just gonna go out there and try to do a 360 or what some of these less known guys have done in recent years, which are just some normal dunks relatively, like nothing original, nothing unique. I'm sure he's going to implement his style, his brand in some way, and I'm sure he's going to try something really difficult, and like you said, might put himself out there to fail a bit. But the one thing I've noticed with him this year, and it's been one of my most interesting things to track this year, is you talked about the criticism he got over the summer, how much he got clowned, the scrutiny of the contract, whatever else just got thrown his way based on how last year ended. Talking to his position coach, Tony Dobbins, and just some other people that are around him, like, it doesn't seem like that's been a big topic of conversation around him. Like, things people are saying, criticism he got over the summer, he just kind of moved on and got better and made this all-star team again and is in that all-NBA mix despite the difficult position he's in on this team. And again, I just love this decision. Like, it's bold to do this when so many other stars are backing out, when it's easy to back out. You can just be standing there on the sideline that night and hanging out. And he's putting himself out there in a way no one else is. So this is awesome to me. And I don't have any worries about it impacting his play or anything like that.
And historically, like, stars have always been in the dunk contest. So maybe this is just a stretch in NBA history where stars were reluctant to do it, and it can kind of get reinvigorated in the future. And when you look back and see, like, oh, why didn't LeBron participate in the dunk contest? And people will look back and see kind of how a lot of this era's major stars sat out. Jaylen Brown will be the one that participated, and maybe in the future we'll go back to kind of like the Michael Jordan era of, if you're a star and you dunk a lot in games, you're going to want to be the dunk contest.
I hope so. At some point, it just stopped being cool. And I guess a big part of that is that the originality went out of it. People just tried so many things. There's only so much you can do. And you can call back to some old stuff as Dwight Howard and others did. But what do you bring in that's actually new, that's unique? Blake did it with the car, and other guys have kind of done some cool stuff like Aaron Gordon and made a name for themselves with it too, like Zach LaVine. So this is an interesting spot for Jaylen and the dunk contest in general. It finally has a star this year. So I'm very interested to see where it goes. And of course, Porzingis, White not going to be there. I think White's slipping up a little bit into January, probably set up a lot of people to be expecting him not to end up there. And then once it goes to the commissioner's pick, I mean, the commissioner's not going to pick Derrick White for All-Star Weekend. No offense to him. It's just not a guy a lot of people look at that from a stardom perspective, unless his production was just so obvious that he had to be there. I am surprised Porzingis isn't going, though. And Trae Young, to me, was probably going to be that first choice because he's just so popular. He's just that show-stopping, long three-point shooting, passing talent that people want to see in a game like this. So I was ready for that one. Scotty Barnes, I get that he's had an all-star level season, but he is one of those players that's a little more defensive-oriented, passing-oriented, not a role player, but has that more secondary skill set alongside another star like Pascal Siakam there in Toronto. So I get that his production is probably deserving of it, but given that Julius Randle and Joel Embiid are the ones going out, I thought they'd want to get a big man in there. And listen, you can only have so many All-Stars if you're the Celtics, but Porzingis, to me, I thought had a pretty compelling case here.
Yeah, he had a compelling case. I think it was probably like maybe a little bit of a marketing thing of, we can get a Toronto player in and you don't really need 3 guys from one team. I looked at their stats today. They were more comparable than I thought. Like, I think Scotty Barnes averages more rebounds and assists, but from a shooting standpoint, Porzingis is more efficient. I think their point totals are pretty similar. I think the main thing on Porzingis' side is that he's missed so many games, and I know that there's not like a game restriction or a game minimum that you have to hit, but like I think he's played 1,000 minutes this year, and Scotty Barnes has played 1,700 minutes. So
that's a big difference.
Yeah, that's kind of substantial, seeing something like that. And so to me, that's probably. I mean, I don't think that's what Adam Silver was necessarily calculating, but my initial instinct was like, ooh, like I feel like Porzingis kind of got snubbed here, and it should have been him and Trey. And then once I started looking at that, and I was thinking about how it is kind of good to pull in different fan bases, and in the case of Toronto, like a whole country. I also don't think he cared that much. Like I feel like we asked him about it a couple of times, and he was like, "I used to care a lot about that, and at this point in my career, it's not something that I really care about." And he's already had the accolade once. I feel like Derrick White almost wanted it more, just based off of like. I feel like whenever he was asked about it, he was always like, he definitely seemed like it would be something that would be a really cool kind of once in a lifetime opportunity.
Yeah, he's never been there. Porzingis has, I think, once, and
Yeah,
he's lived
but
the star life so far. So I think he's past that.
my
And
last stretch kind of eliminated him from contention, like the most recent shooting struggles, because he was already so fringe. Like he needed to kind of like go off these last few weeks, and he didn't. So I
you
wasn't
need that
surprised.
campaign.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like the campaign. That was fun.
He would have been a coach's guy for sure. I mean, that's a guy I think
Yeah,
coaches would have valued, and they went in a different direction too. So, uh, credit to White. I mean, I don't think that defines his first half that he's missing
no.
this, but um, he's still a star in this team. If that makes him feel better. So, uh, we'll see. Breaks coming up fast. I think it's just Hawks, Heat, Nets twice until the Celtics get there.
Wizards, no.
So yeah, easy forget that one on Friday, and that will be, if there is a new Celtic, their potential debut on Friday. So, Hawks game tomorrow, the final game before the deadline, and 3:00 Thursday. We'll see what the Celtics do here, and we will have a special here at 2:00 Thursday. Of course, post game tomorrow night as well. Will you be in the house tomorrow, Noah?
Oh, I will.
All right, check out Noah's coverage. Of course, she's been brilliant this year, covering it all. Noah Dalzell, NBA on Twitter, and read her at Celtics blog. Awesome having you on a couple of these Garden reports so far, Noah. Hopefully we'll see more of you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.